him was a little bit struggling with the spiritual side, I think. And that's probably some opinion of Alan thrown in there. But I think the way he prayed that prayer, Father, if this cup can be removed from me, I see that as the physical side of Jesus struggling a little bit. But he couldn't change. You know, we have, I know there are folks that don't like the song, he could have called 10,000 angels. Was he gonna? No. But could he have? Did he have the power? Yes. So like I say, don't get lost in some of the little details as we go through the study. I don't know how many of you have sat through my discussion of the cross. I'm not going to make it pretty. I will not, because it wasn't pretty. So be prepared for that a little bit too. I see a tired Jesus. I see an emotionally struggling Jesus. I see, especially as he goes on through this process of being arrested, I see emotional and I see physical stress and strain. Those are my two big analytical categories. I put that in. Anybody got another one? I'm open. He could have been a little excited he was fixing to go home, and that goes into some of that positive emotional. Yes, there was some negative emotion, and there was some positive emotion. I think he was ready to go home. He felt like his job was done. And the thing was, Kim, he knew from that day forward, if he did not go, the rest of the job was not going to be done. And the rest of the job had to be done. So yes, there was positive and there was negative. What was, in your mind, what was the one huge emotional thing he just had bearing upon him as he goes through this and he's going to the cross? What's the one huge emotional in your mind? I know what it is in my mind.
I think loneliness.
Loneliness, okay. Yeah.
He's separated from man.
Okay. I don't disagree with that one. Anybody got another one? He was worried about his mother. Again, yeah, agree. Another one? Us. He worried about us. Prayed for us too. Prayed for the disciples. What else emotionally? Fear. Fear. I think the humanness of him, yeah. How could it not be a little bit? What else? That. And where are they going to go? I think he had some fear for them. Because if you look, how many, when Jesus is arrested here in the first part of John chapter 19, how many guys are coming? Probably toward 100 guys are coming after, I don't know, at least we know the 12 plus, no, I'm sorry, yeah, 12. The apostles minus Judas plus Jesus. So there had to be at least 12 of them there, right? If there were more, we don't know. But still, if you're in a battlefield and you're 12 and you see 100 coming, boy, you're hoping you got more firepower than those 100 do. And in that day, they did not. You know, Peter had the ones, at least we know Peter had a sword. Did the others have swords? Not maybe. But they still were not going to physically withstand. And I wonder, I think I agree with Kaufman, Jesus is concerned for the physical of those apostles too, because we're going to find out in a little bit, one of the first things he does when they says, what are you here for? They say, we're here for Jesus. And he says, here I am. He steps forward. Let these other guys go. You got what you came for. What else? Especially hanging on that cross. Okay. Yeah. What else? Okay. What else? Here's mine. Jesus is hanging on that cross. He's physically hurting. He's emotionally drained. And he is bearing our sin. Not just mine. Not just yours. He's got the sin of the world on him. To me, that's the biggie emotional from the human side. From the spiritual side, Kim, he may be, yes, I think he is probably, from the spiritual side, he may still be thinking, hallelujah, this is going to get done. My people are going to get taken care of. They're going to be taken care of. But from the physical, emotional side, and even to some degree the spiritual side, he's bearing the sins of eternity.
It's an interesting contrast because in crucifixion, your own weight suffocates you.
Absolutely.
You have to use your legs to keep propping yourself up. And you think about the weight of sin, and it's this double weight. So he's got the weight of his own physical self and the weight of this sin that's just pushing him down and suffocating.
Huge parallel. Huge parallel there. All right. I think we're ready to read. Anybody have any other comments on that so far?
He was upset because his Christ, my God, why hast thou forsaken me?
Absolutely.
Because of the sin. He didn't turn on his back on his son. He turned on the sin. He couldn't look at the sin.
I think that's some of the sin. I wonder in my mind if that's some of the humanness coming out still too, the human side. All right, John chapter 19 is where we are today. We're going to look at verses 1 through 10 to start out with. Then Pilate took Jesus and flogged him. And the soldiers twisted together a crown of thorns and put it on his head and arrayed him in a purple robe. And they came to him saying, "Hail, King of the Jews," and struck him with their hands. Pilate went out again and said to them, "See, I am bringing him out to you, that you may know that I find no guilt in him." So Jesus went out, wearing the crown of thorns and the purple robe. Pilate said to them, "Behold the man." When the chief priests and the officers saw him, they cried out, "Crucify him! Crucify him!" Pilate said to them, "Take him to yourselves and crucify him. I find no guilt in him." The Jews answered, "We have a law, and according to that law, he ought to die because he made himself the Son of God." When Pilate heard this statement, he was even more afraid. He entered his headquarters again and said to Jesus, "Where are you from?" But Jesus gave him no answer. So Pilate said to him, "You will not speak? Do you not know that I have authority to release you and authority to crucify you?" Jesus answered him, "You would have no authority over me unless it was given to you from above. Therefore, he who delivered me over to you has the greater sin." So John doesn't go through every little detail of the crucifixion. When you look at, here he is at Pilate, in front of Pilate. How many different trials did Jesus have from the time he was arrested to the time he's crucified? All right, let's see if we can go through. So when they arrested him, they went to Annas and Caiaphas, the sitting high priest, and his father-in-law, who was still kind of recognized as a high priest. All right, he goes to the Sanhedrin. He goes to Pilate. If I'm right, doesn't Pilate send him to Herod? Because Pilate and Herod are kind of buddy-buddy. And then Herod sends him back to Pilate. Were they all trials? Not what we would consider trials, but they were all trials in a way. He sees 6 guys from this time of arrest to the time of crucifixion. He says 6 guys, one of them twice. And that's where we are now. We're at that last one with Pilate. The other thing that John doesn't bring out is all of the sayings of the cross. Somebody help me. Are there 6 or 7? I get my numbers confused. There's either 6 or 7 sayings on the cross. And John only brings out a few of them. And we'll hit them as we get to the cross here in just a minute. The other thing I don't think John does is he doesn't bring out all of kind of the miracles surrounding the cross. And there's a number of those. And if you want to read about all of those, I suggest you go find on studylight.org Burton Kaufman's commentary. It makes it a real easy reading if you go to chapter 27 of his commentary, he goes through every one of by list, those trials, those miracles, and those sayings. He's got them all in concise format. You just got to find them in chapter 27 commentary. We're not going to go through all that today. But here he is. He's before Pilate. We talked about Pilate being buddy-buddy with Herod. And here's Pilate. Who is Pilate? Let's do a little bit of who are we? Who is Pilate? And who's his boss? Herod. Herod is king of the Jews, if I'm not mistaken. He's recognized king of the Jews, but Herod is not Pilate's boss. Pilate is the Roman governor. Who's Pilate answer to? Caesar, Rome. I don't disagree. Pilate and Herod are right here. They're trying to govern together, but really, Pilate's boss is Caesar. So you have Pilate here in this scenario. He's trying to keep how many different people happy? He doesn't want Caesar hearing about, oh, they've got another uprising, another stirring in Judea. That looks bad, don't he? What does Caesar want from Pilate? Keep them happy and keep sending me the money. I want my taxes, and I want you to keep everybody under control. I won't say happy. It's better if they're happy, but I want my taxes, keep them under control. I don't need any uprisings. I don't need any political blah, blah, blah. All right? So he's trying to keep Rome happy. Who else is Pilate probably trying to keep happy? Herod. They're buddies. Who else? The Jews in general, the general population. He's overseeing them. You know, as a boss, I like it when my employees like me, but they don't have to love me all the time. And it's kind of the same way with a ruler. Rulers don't care if you love them all the time. They don't care if you really like them all the time, but they like it when you do. So Pilate's happier when the people are happy. Who else? Who else Pilate answering to? And you kind of put these two together in a way. You kind of hinted at it when you said Jews. High priest and the Sanhedrin. And you can kind of put them together in a way. And again, yes, Greg brings up, he has a wife that's already told him have nothing to do with this Jesus. And I don't know, he's trying to make her happy, but he's trying to at least appease her, listen to her. We gentlemen know if we do listen to our wives and at least acknowledge we heard them and preferably do what they say, you know, they want us to do, it's a lot better in our world, right?
Well, he's not, though he is governor, he's not elected.
No, he's appointed.
He's a military commander.
Right.
He's a military person, a military governor put there, basically put martial law
Right.
over this area. So he has a lot of control, but you need all, like Rome did with all of the local populaces, you had to control that by controlling the elements that
True.
control society. So you have the king, you have the religious leaders, you have the movers and shakers of society who are telling you what to do with
Right.
this ne'er-do-well.
So what he's saying is basically be like us in our country here, and somebody else comes in and overthrows us, basically, but they leave all the other people to take care of it, but you do what I say. And that's kind of where Pilate was with Rome, do as I say, whether it's military, whether it's give them what they want or need at the time. Okay? Anybody else you can think of Pilate's trying to, I think I hit most of them. So Pilate is sitting here and he's examining Jesus, and he tells the people what? I can't find anything wrong. You haven't brought me anything to justify crucifying this guy. And of course, think back. How long is the Sanhedrin, how long has the high priest been trying to kill Jesus now? How long have they been wanting to? That's maybe a better question, Clint. How long have they been wanting to? Long time. At least 2 years. Year and a half to 2 years. They've been wanting to. And they finally, and Mike, I won't say this right, they finally got to where either they got brave enough, but I also want to say, it was in Jesus' time. Because before, when Jesus would be in peril, what would he tell them? Or what would he do? He walked out a bit through the group of people who were trying to throw him off the cliff. It wasn't his time. And they have events where the apostles are concerned. We don't need to go there. We don't need to do that. But Jesus, it's okay. It's not my time. Jesus is still in control, and it is his time now. Did I say that right? Okay. So he's before Pilate. Pilate can't find anything wrong. Pilate wants to. What does Pilate do? He goes and washes his hands before he's done. Let his blood be on your hands. Pilate removes himself, but he doesn't remove his guys. Even though he tells the Jews to go crucify Jesus, who actually does the crucifixion? The Romans. I need to read a little further before we talk more. Give me just a second. Yep, let's go ahead and read a little further, and then we'll come back. Let's pick up verse 12. From then on, even Pilate sought to release him, but the Jews cried out, "If you release this man, you are not Caesar's friend. Everyone who makes himself a king opposes Caesar." So when Pilate heard these words, he brought Jesus out and sat down on the judgment seat at a place called the Stone Pavement, or an Aramaic Gabbatha. So Caesar's kind of sitting here in this kind of balcony setting, and they've got this big open area where all this stuff is taking event next to. And I can't remember the other name that area has, but it has another name too. So let's pick up again in verse 12. No. Real quick. 13. Nope, 14. All right, let's pick up 14. Now it was the day of preparation, the Passover. It was about the 6th hour. He said to the king of the Jews, "Behold your king." Let me stop there one more time. When do most of us, what day of the week do most of us think that this is occurring? Friday. I found it quite interesting when I'm reading Kaufman. Kaufman thinks it was on Thursday because of this. Now, it was the day of preparation of the Passover, and then there was in one reading, or maybe this one further down, it talks about it being a special day. And he is of the opinion it might be. But again, don't let that detract from the overall. That's one of the things I'm saying. Don't let that detract from the overall. We don't know all the answers necessarily to those questions. I agree. I think it's Friday. Pick up verse 15. They cried out, away with him, crucify him." Pilate said to them, "Shall I crucify your king?" The chief priests answered, "We have no king but Caesar." Oh my goodness. You just had a Jew tell them we have no king but Caesar? Really? So he delivered him over to be crucified. So they took Jesus, and he went out bearing his own cross to a place called the place of the skull, which is in Aramaic called Golgotha. They crucified him, and with him 2 others, one on either side, and Jesus between. Pilate wrote an inscription, and on it he put, "Jesus of Nazareth, the King of the Jews." Many of the Jews read this inscription, for the place where Jesus was crucified was near the city, and it was written in Aramaic, in Latin, and in Greek. So the chief priest of the Jews said to Pilate, "Do not write the King of the Jews, but rather the man said, 'I am King of the Jews.'" Pilate answered, "I've written what I've written." And it's going to stay that way, is basically what he's telling them. When the Jews had crucified Jesus, or when the soldiers had crucified Jesus, they took his garments and divided them into 4 parts, 1 part for each soldier, also his tunic, but the tunic was seamless, woven in one piece from top to bottom. So they said one to another, let us not tear it, but cast lots for it to see whose it shall be. This was to fulfill the scripture which says, they divided my garments among them, and for my clothing they cast lots. So the soldiers did these things, but standing by the cross of Jesus were his mother and his mother's sister, Mary the wife of Clopas, and Mary Magdalene. When Jesus saw his mother and the disciple whom he loved standing nearby, he said to his mother, Woman, behold your son. Then he said to the disciple, Behold your mother. And from that hour the disciple took her to his own home. After this, Jesus, knowing that all was finished, said to fulfill the scripture, I thirst. A jar full of sour wine stood there. So they took a sponge for the sour wine on a hyssop branch, held it to his mouth. And when Jesus had received the sour wine, he said, It is finished, bowed his head, and gave up his spirit. So, back to my original question. Who actually did the crucifixion? Huh? Well, yeah, we did. Yes, that is the ultimate answer. But the physical answer is the Roman soldiers. Even though the Jews, he sends Jesus to the Jews to be crucified, the Roman soldiers do the crucifixion. Only Rome can put somebody to death, and it was never a Roman, at least by crucifixion. They might kill them another way, but they're not going to crucify them. They're not going to make them suffer and torture like they would a non-Roman. Roman crucifixion didn't include just crucifixion most of the time either. Before Jesus went to the cross, what else did they do? They flogged him. And that was a pretty traditional part of that also. To really understand, I think, deeply some of the things that are going on there, you've got to go study a Roman soldier a little bit and understand, number one, the Roman soldier had a job. He was going to do what he was told to do. But the way that reads sometimes, Mike, I'm not sure they didn't enjoy their job. I think those guys enjoyed their job. They enjoyed torture. They enjoyed humiliation. And they were pros and good at it. So when a flogging occurs, I mean, we've seen the pictures of the Old West and somebody gets tied up and they get flogged. Well, that's basically what it was in that day too. Take the podium right there and extend it up about 3 or 4 feet, make it as big as a log. And you've got some ropes or some chains there. And generally that person's hands were tied above their head, their back stripped, and this whip that had multiple pieces of leather or rope attached to it with other little things on the end of it like nails or glass or metal shards or even bones, sharp bones. They're plaited in or tied in to the end of that whip. Now, if the Jews were going to be allowed to do this whipping from Old Testament reading, how many times could they actually do a flogging from Old Testament times? 40 was the most. And they usually did it 39 so they didn't mess up and do 41 and miscount. Let's just say there's a lot. There's a lot. And you start thinking about the first lash and the wince of pain. That's where I want to stop for just a minute. We talked about the emotional part. I want you to think about what the worst day of your life emotionally has been, and you're not where Jesus is. And I want you to think about the worst day that you hurt physically. I'll interject here. It was about 1.5 years ago when I couldn't find a place to almost lay down and get comfortable. And that's nothing compared to what Jesus is fixing to go through. Whatever physically or emotionally you have had pain with, you're not touching this. with a pole from here to the moon or further.
Doctor's office or in the ER somewhere, having a whole lot of pain. And they asked me on a scale of 1 to 10, which they ask everybody.
Oh, there, yeah.
What is your pain?
Yeah.
And they said, thank Jesus Christ.
I hadn't heard that one.
Hardest pain I could have.
All right, so if you couldn't hear that, she's been in the hospital. They asked her what her pain level was, and the pain of Jesus Christ is the most. Yeah, that's a pretty good answer. I will say this too. Oh, yeah. Never tell a doctor 11. Never, because they think all you want's drugs. Been there and done that. Make sure you tell them it's 10. Think about that day when you hurt the most. Physically, emotionally, you're not there yet. You're not there yet. Flog once, flog twice, flog how many times? Think about every one of those marks. The drops of blood, the torn flesh, the exposed muscles.
It's even more than that, because not just the surface, but your kidneys are exposed
Yeah.
below your ribs. So if you're hitting those kidneys, you're causing kidney
Internal damage too.
Damage
Yep.
that is going to make it, that's
Right. But to really understand, and my point is this, to make it really understandable, you have to see it in your mind. I'm not going to diminish the message of the cross. You've got to see that in your mind to even come close to understanding what Jesus did for us that day. What happened to most people after flogging? They died. A lot of them died. They couldn't even take the flogging, Mike. Sepsis, blood loss, stress level, heart failure, heart attack. No, I wouldn't say heart failure, but heart attack, arrhythmia. The endorphins, the enkephalins are going crazy in their body, throws them into arrhythmias. Just the stress. A lot of them died just from the flogging. So here we have them through with the flogging. They take him off of that. And then what do they expect that guy to do next? Carry a 100-pound cross member from the cross to the place of crucifixion. I can't carry 100 pounds anymore anyway, Charles. Partly because I don't want to, but physically just can't. And he tried to pick that up and bear it, and he couldn't. And he had to have some help. That's a different story. I don't want to get off on that story. I don't want to diminish the message of the cross today. He had to have some help to get it to the place of crucifixion. We probably ought to stop there. We may stop there. Let you think about all of those things today, and then we'll actually talk about next week that actual process of crucifixion. We only got like 5 minutes left. Absolutely. He's exhausted. Right. Yep. Right. One of the things that we have, in that day, the only way they could tell people about this and try to help them see it, Mike, was through the Word and through written Word. You can go to Google now and you can Google crucifixion and you can see, the process of Roman crucifixion. We've got movies about crucifixion, and you can help form your mind around. And I know some people can't watch them, they just can't. But you still need to try to get a mental picture in your mind to fully understand and to help us when we struggle. We don't have it very bad. We don't have it bad.
Just like the movie, The Passion of the Christ,
shaking.
I was watching how they watch that.
Yep, yep. It's not easy to watch, but you still need to try to really understand and to really put your heart in the right place for how important this is and how important we are in the service. We need to try to do that. To be real with ourselves.
I have a question.
Okay?
Do we think that it was done in such a manner so that it was so gruesome and so graphic as to get our attention? Because if they had just beheaded Jesus, there's no real, it's like, okay, he just died.
All right.
But the fact that we have to know and we study and we read about how tormenting this is because we're just not that smart enough to get it.
All right.
God has given us such an extreme example.
He made it more graphic
to get our attention.
to get our attention. I can't disagree with that. He made it more graphic. There was no, and I don't know in history that there was any other uglier way you could die, any more humiliating. And that's one of the things with Joe Paul's lessons. He's talked about it's just ugly. It's ugly. It's humiliating. It's painful. There's just no way around it. Let us not diminish that message. All right, I'm done today.
He did it because our sins were so terrible, and he took the weight of it and the shame and everything upon him. So it was so terrible to him that he had separated from his Father, that he wanted us to understand how severe it really was.
How severe it really was. Can't disagree with that. All right, thank you for your time, your attention. We'll finish up the actual events of the crucifixion next week.